Here are some highlights of this program.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome to Brainstorm exclusive interview.
Our education should be corrected, adapted, and updated.
Live better, they can send their children to school because they can interact with their authorities.
Mechanics, electricity, computer science, innovation,
And we know that it's a brainstorm.
Yourself, after watching this interesting program, notice the final statement made by our notable guest, a brand new one. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Brainstorm Broadcast. The world has ever become a global village. New technology, global communication, business interchange. Translation and interpretation have been playing a significant role in all these domains. Today's theme is the future of translation and interpretation. What is a translation or interpretation? Can these both concepts be used interchangeably? Translation and interpretation, an art or a science? Is the future of translation and interpretation bleak in view of AI? Joining me now on this platform is a long outstanding professional and sworn translator and interpreter, Mr. Yulu Kabamba. Hello and welcome, sir.
Hi, thanks for having me here.
Yes, my pleasure to welcome you one more time. We're going to discuss the translation and interpretation, the future of it. So, as a professional and a sworn translator and interpreter, how can you break down these concepts, translation and interpretation?
Translation and interpretation, for many people there's a lot of confusion, we note, trying to understand what both concepts means. I would simply put it this way: translation and interpretation both are about communication. Translation is about written text. You read a text and you translate it, but all are about conveying messages. When it comes to interpretation, it's about listening and interpreting, conveying the message as well.
Okay, so this implies the knowledge of both language. Because you translate, it means that you convey one message in one language, or language A to language B. So this is what you mean.
Right. So on the one hand, you have the source language or the source text. And on the other hand, you have the target text or the target language.
The following podcast will help us explain or shed light on the difference between translation and interpretation. Please take a look at it, and we'll be back.
It's an age-old question. It is also an honest one, and still increasingly common in the world of linguistics. What's the difference between a translator and an interpreter? To be sure, translation and interpreting are two sides of the same coin. The key with interpreting is that it is verbal. Interpreters specialize in the spoken word. Whether they are in person or connected via phone or video chat, an interpreter is summoned to ensure that the audience for one language can comprehend what is being said by a foreign speaker. Meanwhile, translators dive a little deeper. This is due to the fact that translators concentrate on text. Whereas interpreters have to speak, translators have to write. Both skills require the ability to speak more than one language. Interested to learn more about the differences between translation and interpreting? Visit us at www.thelanguagedoctors.org.
Now, can these both concepts, translation and interpretation, be used interchangeably?
No. Interpretation is about oral communication, while translation is about written communication, period.
I want you to make things clear. Sometimes a lot of folks are in confusion. Translation, interpretation, an art or a science?
They are both art and science. They used to be just art in the past centuries, but as time evolves, they turn to sciences. For example, we say traductologie in French, that is translation science. And we say interprétologie, that is the science of interpreting or interpreting science.
What does it take to be a translator or interpreter? Knowledge of language, 2, 3 languages, or a mastery of some techniques or principles of translation?
All. You need to know the language. There is the linguistic aspects, and you also need to know the techniques of translation. Otherwise, you would just remain on the literal translation. While translation has evolved, it involves a lot of techniques, and we have what we may refer to as indirect translation.
The following video will shed light on translation and interpretation, some nuances, and then we're going to find out some techniques and principles of translation. Please watch and we'll be back.
Welcome to Montana Language Services Language Access Staff Training. Before we go into the individual tools and methods, let's make one important distinction. Human language can be either in written form, spoken aloud, or signed. Translators convert written text from a source language into a target language, and good translation is not just a substitution of words. And translators are not just bilingual speakers. Experienced translators deliver text that is accurate, complete, and appropriate for the context in which it will be used and for the audience who will be using it. Machine translation is the use of automated software that translates text without human involvement. It's based on probability, not meaning. It doesn't understand the context of what it's translating, and it guesses the most likely translation, so if you can't read both languages, you'll never know if it guessed correctly. While machine translation may save time and money, human translation is essential when the context of communication requires any level of reliable accuracy. And it's also non-compliant with language access regulations to use machine translation in any context that involves healthcare, law enforcement, or court services. You can submit online translation requests on our website for a free quote. We accept all file formats but prefer source files such as Word documents to give a more accurate quote and save on formatting fees. Be sure to consider whether you want your document in bilingual format or not, and feel free to send us files from other organizations that you may use with your customer base, and we can reach out on your behalf to request approval for that translation. Interpreters convert information from one spoken language into another, or between spoken and sign language. A professional interpreter is an invaluable resource in any verbal interaction with LEP, deaf, or hard of hearing individuals. And professional interpreters are not just bilingual speakers. They are neutral third parties who are trained to get your message across accurately, smoothly, and efficiently.
Okay, over the past few years of translation and interpretation experience, so did you face some challenges on some obstacles along with your profession?
Yes, of course. When I started this now, I've been working as interpreter and translator for over 38 years. When I started, the issue was to have more vocabularies. The issue was to have a good command of the language, the source and the target language. But nowadays, a lot of progress have been made, and we have to learn the machine. We have the machine translation, and we have the computer-assisted translation as well. It has turned to an industry, while before it wasn't. Now we can produce tons of documents translated, as an example.
From your own experience, you admit that Translation, doing a good translation or interpretation, does it take, or is college education mandatory or is optional?
Oh, am I going to criticize those who didn't learn, didn't go to the schools of translation? No. They made a very good contribution, a very high contribution. At the time, there was no school of translation yet. But you have individuals, you have scholars, you have practitioners who produced translation and interpretation. It was commendable, it was good. But I would still advise people to go to university, to go to schools, colleges of translation and interpretation to learn. Why? Because if they don't go, they would never know there exist techniques, there exist theories. So it's very important to know the techniques. If I could give you just one example, the president believes it's going to be tough. While translating into French, I would say, selon le président, la situation va être beaucoup plus compliquée. You see, because you have learned the technique and the name of the technique is known, transposition. And then you get to that. That is more perfect translation. So those who have been to school know about it, and those who never been to school would never be able to translate like that. So there are different levels of translation nowadays.
Okay, what you say might be true or may not. Sounds like that. Since you yourself, you have attended university or college training, you follow that. So you mean that anyone who attended university or college training without knowing any language can simply learn the techniques, the principles of translation, and become a translator or interpreter? That's what you mean?
Yeah, they can be good interpreters and translators, but I would still recommend that they go to university, because there they will learn about the science, and I do repeat, the science of translation or the science of interpreting.
Without knowing any language, no command of any language. Somebody knows only French, no English, no Spanish. Can he become a translator with all those techniques, principles? That's all? You think it's be possible?
Becoming a translator, there must be two languages. And with the knowledge of one language only, or the good command of one language only, you cannot be a translator, because there must be both sides, two sides. You have two languages before being or declaring yourself a translator or an interpreter.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, follow the following videos about translation, different types of translation and interpretation. Please watch and we'll be back.
Translation. Translation is a tricky business. There are so many things that are very difficult to translate from one language to another. Of course, lots of words are easy. A book is a book in all languages. But is it? In English, you can go buy the book if you want to follow the rules. What book is this? Many of the things that are difficult to translate are cultural. I also think it's pretty much impossible to translate jokes and humor. I think that's why we have the expression lost in translation. Being a translator must be a difficult job, especially translating things like legal documents. If you make one tiny mistake, you could mess everything up. One day, we'll translate everything on the internet.
Now, as one of the heads of ATIPCO, what are some of your responsibilities and how do you run the association?
As far as I'm concerned, what I want to do with this association is to bring all the eminent translators and interpreters together. Those who served this country in their capacity as interpreter and translator without attending university or any program at any university. I want them to be on board. And I also want those who have attended classes at university to come together. So bringing together all the interpreters and translators will be my first mission. And the second one, I see that there are lots of issues while producing interpretation and translation in the DRC. What is it exactly? That there are many problems. There are those who have not attended university. You will feel that they are very limited to some extent. There are things, there are techniques they don't have. For me, it's a concern and a serious one. Those attending university but do not have, for example, the practical aspects, the practical training. That is also another concern for me. So I would like those who have not attended university to go and learn about the techniques of translation, the science of translation and interpretation. Those at the university also go to the field and practice translation and interpretation in the field in order to become more experienced.
Okay, so what is the output of those who attend your association, participate in different activities organized, in addition to what they learn at the college?
We do have activities, and we do plan to have activities. You know, the association at IPCO, like many other associations in the DRC, given the context, given all the difficulties, the challenges the country is facing, the association also went through difficult time. It's maybe now that we want to revive certain things, but there are a number of activities we are planning to carry out, and we have a plan for example, the year 2025, and with a lot of training and a lot of involvement as well in the modern aspects of the translation. I mean the machine translation, I mean the computer-assisted translation as well.
Okay, there is a serious problem with a factor of affecting, of course, translation and interpretation, knowing well as ongoing learning process, the translation and interpretation. So how do you adjust to the modern new technology as far as artificial intelligence, AI, is concerned? How do you adjust to this new technology?
Yeah, we have, within the association, we have people dealing with that. And most recently, we had a training on artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence for us is we are dedicating a lot of time to that. We will be dedicating a lot of time to artificial intelligence because we want people to be seriously trained. Today, translation is not like in the past. You may be sitting at your office, you have like 10 pages, but now you may have 1,000 pages, and the expectation is that in 2 days or in 1 week, you're done with the 1,000 pages. How are you going to proceed? Not just with your brain, but there is a helper, a precious helper, that is the machine. So the machine contribution is key, and for us, we believe that artificial intelligence has a key role to play, and we have to learn, and we have to be familiar with that tool. That is the reason why we have provided for trainings.
Okay, the future of translation and interpretation. For those who watch this program right now, you may or not know the history of translation. So through this podcast, we want to let you know the history of translation. Please watch.
We don't often wonder where the practice of translation originated. We just accept that it exists, and it's business critical. The word translation derives from the Latin term meaning to bring across. Logically, translation and interpreting didn't enter the scene until language began to show up in written form, around 3200 BC in the form of hieroglyphics, and in spoken form when the Greeks and Romans began to use their slaves to interpret for them. Major technological advances, such as the availability of paper and the invention of the printing press, led to the first ever book being printed, the Latin Bible. It is perhaps the internet and mechanical translation that has really revolutionised the field. The slow speed of manual translation and the vast amount of content requiring translation has led to technology stepping in. Thus, machine translation and computer-aided human translation were born. Nearly every culture in the world has interactions with every other culture. This means that there are an incalculable number of translation requirements every second of every minute of every day. Officially, there are about 6,800 languages spoken around the world. By some estimates, the translation industry should reach $123 billion by 2019. There is no doubt that the translation industry is a huge industry and growing. This ever-expanding industry helps to bring everyone closer together with each and every translated word. Now is the time to make yourself heard in any language.
All right, so artificial intelligence or AI is a significant importance when it contributes a lot to the translation. So you mean that in the days ahead, machines will replace, or some software will replace human being in translation or interpretation?
Some people think yes. Let me tell you and bring some smile here in this program. Last time, I think a month ago, I was at Hotel du Fleuve, and I was involved in a discussion with maybe a French interpreter who was telling me, you wasting your time studying interpretation or translation at the university, because now everything is modernized, man is being replaced with the machine. You still want to go on studying. And I laughed, just laughed. Why did I laugh in response to the issue raised by that man? It's because machine would never replace the human being. Machine or computer is just a helper to the human being. A human being is the inventor. The human translator is the one who would be, or the human being will be instructing the machine, telling the machine what to do. Machine cannot change the course set. And machine cannot deal with a different context, but a human being is able to deal with a different context. What about the cultural realities? For example, English as spoken in England, English as spoken in America, in India, in Africa. It goes along with the culture, the cultural aspects. Can the machine deal with all that? Machine is just one way, but machine cannot produce all the different contexts at the same time. That is the responsibility of the human being. And I would personally say that machine produce a mass translation more than the human being. I would recognize, I would acknowledge that. And machine produce what we call the rough translation. The perfect translation, the one to declare the translation is perfect, is the human being.
Okay, now let's talk about the students attending universities or colleges learning translation and interpretation. So once they are graduates, what is the fate? Are they job seekers or job creators?
Both. Some will be ready to work to serve in institutions, and I know colleagues who served in bigger institutions, United Nations, IMF, and so on and so forth. Others will start their business because that is the advantage when someone learns translation and interpretation. If the training was perfect, if the training was sound, the person can start business. That is the advantage. But then let me come. This was very passionate, as you could see. The machine translation, computer-assisted translation. Let me share this joke with you and also those watching. There was once a senior member of the United Nations based here in the DRC, and it was the Women's Day. He wanted to say something to the women in Lingala, and he went to Google. He Googled, he wanted to say, "Hi, ladies, I'm happy to be here," and so on. But the machine gave him Mbote Bamama Nabino. Well, he wanted to say Mbote Nabino Bamama, but the machine gave him Mbote Bamama Nabino. He was happy. He didn't know what it meant. So he went and in his speech, the first sentence he said, Mbote Bamama Nabino, and all those ladies got upset. They were not happy. But he was asking, why are they not happy? Because that was the machine translation. Nobody checked. So there is still a role to be played by the human translator, that is that of checking. Also taking into account the cultural aspect.
Okay, we talked a lot about translation and interpretation, techniques, principles, the difference between translation and interpretation. So now, what does the future hold for translation and interpretation, shortly speaking?
There will be a lot to do in future. Communities must come together. Meetings must be held. People from different countries must talk. People from different parts of the world must come together. And you heard the world becoming a global village. How this will come about without any help of the translator or the interpreter? So there is a whole future, and a bright one, for the interpreting field and the translation field. That's what I would say. But suffice that we bring together the machine contribution and the human contribution. We have to bring all that together, a combination of both. Progress on all sides. Human beings should not say, okay, I'm not now going to learn most efficiently. I will just do everything depending on the machine. That is a serious mistake. What is, for example, in a room, there is a breakdown. What is going to happen? You go in front and start speaking.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Yulukabamba, for coming on this program. All is well that ends well. The future of translation and interpretation. We try to break down the different aspects of translation and interpretation through this program. Coming next, ideas, even insights related to the same thing, translation and interpretation. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned on the Second National Channel. Bye. Here are some highlights of this program.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome to Brainstorm exclusive interview.
Our education should be corrected, adapted, and updated.
Live better, they can send their children to school because they can interact with their authorities.
Techniques, electricity, computer science, innovation, yeah.
And we know that it's a brainstorm.
You yourself, after watching this interesting program, notice the final statement made by our notable guest, a brand new one.